Welcome to Destination Marriage, a podcast about successfully navigating the winding roads of marriage. Whether you are looking to get married, you are engaged, newly married, or have been married for years, we want to share with you how we have successfully navigated those winding roads over the past 18 plus years.
Join us on this journey as we discuss real life experiences, both highs and lows, and what we have learned along the way. Happiness, grace, passion are some of the things we all strive for in marriage, and we invite you to take this journey with us. Welcome to Destination Marriage.
Welcome to episode number 7 of Destination Marriage. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are thrilled to have you join us today for an honest conversation about protecting the spirit of your children.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk a lot about how to do that and kind of what we mean by that. I think it's a very important topic that doesn't maybe get discussed enough between parents and between, out in the community around how do you do that effectively and protect your children, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And for this one, you're the queen of protecting the spirit of our children. I take my hat off to you for this. So, a lot of what we'll talk about, certainly you're gonna have a lot of thoughts on the matter, and we discuss this between the two of us all the time. So hopefully, it's good for everybody that's listening. The first thing we'll talk about is kind of before we kind of get into very specific instances and how we've managed those. I think is talk about kind of the general things that you can do to protect the spirit of your children.
Right.
I think first and foremost, it's about building confidence in who they are as people. And it's different a little bit between how a father approaches it versus how a mother approaches it and how they receive it. And certainly it's different whether they're little girls or little boys, and how they receive things. But, I think that for me, a couple of things that are big is really those words of affirmation and really like building their self-esteem and just pumping them up, telling them how proud you are, how proud I am of them and things that they are, and not just things that they've done or accomplished, but like who they are as people.
Yeah.
Right. And like I try to make note of that, especially over the last few years. Like I'm really proud of just your spirit or your confidence or your maturity or whatever that looks like. I think another one that is important for me is to make sure that when we're correcting them, we're not kind of labeling the action as that's who they are. Right. So if they're made a mess and didn't clean it up, it's not you're a messy person. It's
right. You're a slob.
Yeah, you're a slob, right? Because they hear that. You don't realize it. And certainly something as if I'm angry about something and I yell, I have to realize how they're. I have to realize like how they're hearing that. Right. It may not be how it comes across as anger. And if certainly it'd be doubling down if I said you're a slob or you're a loser or you're a failure. Right. So I think that's something I really try to make sure that I.
Right. Not only that, but how a child receives those words would be different than if I say, oh my gosh, Tommy, you're such a slob at leaving your socks on the floor, which we would know we're saying it jokingly to one another.
Maybe, but maybe you're just destroying my spirit.
Never. But yeah, I 100% agree.
So what... Like I said at the beginning, like you really take the ball with this in our household, and you do a fantastic job. So what do you?
Thank you.
What in general do you see as kind of some things that you do really well to protect the spirit of our boys?
I know for a fact that one of the number one things that I have done consistently since day one with both boys is establishing an understanding that both of them can speak openly about their feelings with me. So it really creates like a comfortable space, regardless of what those feelings are. I think it's really important, and I've noticed this as well with other adults that lack emotional awareness. It really starts at a young age, and I think that emotional awareness builds confidence, knowing and understanding how you feel, why you feel that way, but then also knowing how to communicate that. That's something that really is a miss with a lot of people. And it starts at home. And I really want to, especially with the boys, because I think that, and this, again, I'm a mom of boys. This is different, if you have, 5 kids, if you only have girls, or if you only, it is different. Every kid is different. But with kids in general, Understanding their emotions and encouraging them to also have that emotional awareness builds confidence, and they have that comfort in knowing that they can come to mom or they can come to dad. And on top of that, it actually creates a security in them. They feel safe, that even if they're not understanding and they need to talk through these things, they have someone to talk to without judgment. It doesn't have to be, where they feel like, I don't know if they'll understand. Just they need to know that's always their listening ear. Who else is going to look out for them more so than mom and dad?
Right.
And so I've always done that with both the boys.
Yeah, especially with our older son. He is, he knows more. I mean, heck, I laugh sometimes because you just have a natural way of doing that. My mom, you know more about my mom than I know about my mom. She comes to you with things and I'm like, what? I never knew that. But I think that, what I've noticed from kind of just observing is that the boys will come to you with things and you don't immediately pass judgment. And I think for me, and I think maybe sometimes fathers and men in general, and I know unfortunately, definitely with me, is I tend to, when I hear that, I empathize and then I'm immediately like, well, all right, well, let's fix it.
Yeah.
And that, or here's what I think you should do or something like that. And that, I think with our older son, maybe that turned him off, maybe younger. It doesn't work, and everybody's a little different. Our younger son is more like me, personality wise, and he sometimes will take that as like, okay, if I say that, well, here's what I would do. Okay. But then, it's hard. But what I've observed is that's not the best way.
Well, if you're trying to teach them, right, to also give them the tools necessary to be able to understand their own emotions, I think that if you immediately come back with this is what you need to do, you're not really talking through the process. You also
They're not
need
learning
to teach them, learn how to
Yeah.
process the emotions.
Agreed.
Asking questions so you can continue to have that conversation instead of cutting off the dialogue.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I think you do a fantastic job with that. So
thank you.
It's just something I'm learning as we go along in this journey of parenting.
Well, I can talk you through it and help you.
Oh, thanks. I'm still trying. I know another thing for me that I've always tried to, knowing that I can, I'll have these, I don't stay angry long. I have bursts of getting frustrated and yell or whatever, and then 2 seconds later I'm fine, but it scares the boys and annoys you. But I also do try to be very cognizant of apologizing to the boys when I screw up so that they recognize and know that, all right, it's okay if you screw up, if you mess up, you apologize for it and ask for forgiveness and move on. I think that's just an emotional maturity thing that I'm trying to teach the boys. But I think it also, hopefully, as their life progresses, if something happens, somebody apologizes to them and they're sincere about it, like accept it and move on, right? And just know that there's, because if you start holding grudges or bitters towards somebody and all of a sudden it can wreak havoc on your life emotionally. So I think
absolutely, but you're also teaching them that there needs to be a level of accountability.
Yeah.
And so as they, like you mentioned, as they get older and they're out in the world, and whether it's a coworker, someone they're dating, another family member, we should hold them accountable. I'm not saying be bitter about it, but obviously we want to teach them that certain things are not okay. But on that note, also how you speak to your child at home, I think, and even around others, really sets the tone of what is acceptable. And I say that because, just like you mentioned earlier, if I say you're a slob or, you're a failure, and, I'm sure there's worse things people have, said, unfortunately, out of anger or a moment of weakness, but we're teaching them what is okay as far as how they're to be spoken to and also how they should speak to others. Those words that we breathe into our children can either build them up or cut them down. And so I really want to be mindful, even when it's an instruction, a time where maybe I'm not agreeing with something that they've shared with me or their behavior, especially with the boys, I want to make sure that I'm speaking the right words to them, because I also know that they'll shut me down. They'll shut me out.
Right.
And then it'll end up being a negative outcome. They'll feel, negatively towards me. They won't learn from the situation. One of the really great books that I actually read, and this is specific to moms. So if you are a mom of a boy, I would highly recommend and encourage you to read this book. It's called Mother and Son: The Respect Effect by Emerson Eggerichs. And it's a phenomenal book because there are so many books out there about dads and daughters, or there's daddy and daughter dances. I don't really see a lot of things that are kind of encouraging and fostering that relationship between mother and son. And I will say, because I know that as a little girl, how I received verbal praise or things that were spoken to me, how I received them, it is different as far as how I speak to the boys. And this was actually a huge eye-opener for me.
How so?
Well, just little things and complimenting them. And for example, one of the things that I have changed in how I speak to the boys is recognizing diligence or hard work, things that they've worked towards. I may not have said anything along those lines before. I would, they'd come into room and be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so handsome. Oh, I love you," and smother them. But I should also recognize when they put a lot of hard work. For example, our youngest is playing an instrument, and he's been working and practicing towards that, and he wanted to be first chair in band, and he was able to successfully achieve first chair. So it was something that after I had read the book, I recognized I really needed to compliment him and acknowledge the fact that he put the time and the effort. I mean, he worked hard at it, and he set a goal and he achieved it. And then with our oldest, as he started to work, and now he's left at home, but he's working a lot, I always compliment him on working so hard. He's learning how to develop that work ethic and kind of learning certain things around hard work and the benefits of that. And so I want to make sure that I'm complimenting those efforts, because yes, they do receive it differently than maybe I would as a little girl or even as a teenager.
Yeah.
If you had said that to me, I'd be like, oh, okay. It would have done nothing for me.
Right.
I mean, it's not a bad thing if you would have said, "Hey, you really worked hard at that." Oh, okay, great.
What's funny is I look back as with my father, like he was constantly saying how proud he was and this, and he constantly is. Now, if as a teenager I'd roll my eyes, but like
he didn't say how handsome you were.
But it was always, I mean, he was just constantly, and it was always with that big smile.
Yeah.
And maybe I, roll my eyes, but I think it helped build confidence in who I was growing up.
You were always very confident.
Yeah, to a degree, right? So
I think so.
No, those are great. Those are great points. I love watching you with the boys, like, because you don't do it. They're close with you and they feel comfortable telling you things, but you don't approach it as like, well, I'm just your buddy, I'm your friend. You can tell me anything.
I'm
You're still mom, and there's respect, and there's consequences, and it's great. You do a fantastic job. So if we kind of hit on a couple, but if we kind of switch gears, and maybe this is helpful for everybody listening to learn how we've changed as parents, as we recognize there really is differences between father and mother around that protection side. I mean, men, father, myself, I'm, naturally more protective physically, I think. And so that's an easy one. Let's be honest. Like, it's easy to, if someone's physically hurting your child, to intervene. Like, that's just like, it's instincts. You don't even,
innate.
you don't have to think. But supporting them emotionally is different. So I'd be curious, kind of, if you have kind of an idea or a story about, recognizing the differences between men and women with respect, or between us with how we approach that, and maybe how you've adapted and how we've adapted towards each other, and maybe learn from each other on that.
I recognize I definitely have changed. I mean, we've been married for 18 years. There's obviously been a lot of growth over the years. And we were very young when we had our first child. When it comes to how I've adapted as a mom, I think one of the number one things that I recognize is, when you are stepping into disciplinary mode. In the beginning, I would immediately interject or just feel very defensive, because I hear the raising of the voice, or I don't know, it just automatically put me in protection mode. And now I don't do that, with our youngest, who is now in middle school.
You never do? You don't do that anymore?
I don't do it as often. How about that? I don't do it as often. But it doesn't come from a bad place. I do recognize in myself that a lot of it comes from just, again, this is something that when we're talking about it, we're laying the groundwork. So there's certain things that maybe I didn't have, as a child, that I'm trying to be for the boys. So when I see that, or the raising of the voice, and I really don't like yelling, it's not my jam, but I automatically, it's just a protection mode, because again, when I communicate with the boys, even when I am disciplining and they know I don't play around, we communicate differently.
Yeah.
We just do. But I've recognized that when you're correcting our youngest, I don't step in as much. I don't, honestly.
Okay,
Be fair.
that's fair. I would tell you with our older son, when we were younger parents, and it in the moment, it would really, really make me angry.
Yeah.
When I feel like you're cutting me off, or
Yeah.
it's frustrating.
Yeah.
But I think if we also weren't on the same page, big picture, like it would have been probably devastating.
We didn't go against what the core values were,
Right.
what was acceptable at home and what wasn't.
Right, but
Yeah.
but sometimes the
Wasn't
boys, I think, would they never took advantage of it because we were on the same page. But that's an example, like, where if they recognize, oh, all I've got to do is this, and then mom and dad will then turn it around and fight between the two of them about it. They never did that, but I mean, it used to really make me angry.
I think my goal was more along the lines of, I was just trying to soften the blow of just, not the physical blow, but
It was just Mama Bear taking over, and
I
you
wanted
just
to
see
try
red.
to diffuse
You
a
just
little
see
bit.
red towards me.
Yeah, and I just wanted to try to diffuse the situation. But honestly,
And
I
let's be
think
clear, it's not like you were stopping me from physically
No,
harming
that's
them.
what
It
I'm
was
saying.
just
No, nothing
a lot of
like
times
that.
it was
You're not like-
it was after like the initial I would, get angry for a second and I'd yell, and then you would jump right in.
Yeah.
And that can be
It seems
bad.
right. No, absolutely. Because I
that,
think for a
but-
kid, they can receive it as they can play one
Which
one against the other, or off of the other.
I used to joke with the boys all the time. I said, like, me and mom are on the same page. It's 2 against 1 here, bud. Like,
Yeah.
Just
They
so
really
they
don't
know.
try
They
to
never
do that.
tried to.
No.
Yeah, they never really did. But I think one thing that I've noticed, and we kind of hit on it a little bit with the emotional piece, is just my personality type. If there's an issue, I would, respond a certain way as far as like, let's just fix something. All right, well, here's what I would do. Instead of maybe just being a listening ear. And so I've definitely adapted to you, or have backed off maybe when there's situations arising, and just let that initial phase of the boys just voicing what's going on, instead of jumping right back in and just being that listening ear. That's been something I've tried to work on. I don't know how effective I am at it, but I definitely
I think you're
noticed.
getting better at being a better listener.
Yeah. So, I think the big picture is being mature as parents and recognizing when you need to maybe change how your approach is, and or let the other parent maybe run with a certain situation, and not be a panacea for everything.
Yeah, we both have different strengths with our parenting, but ultimately, if our goal is exactly what we're talking about today with protecting the spirit of our children,
Right.
We may not be identical with every single approach or the way we communicate, but I do think we've done a good job, a better job now as well, with, especially like I mentioned, with adapting as far as discipline, or that communication piece, so they feel like they can be open and it is a safe place.
Yeah. Awesome.
So the other thing I want to touch on is other adults. Other adults speaking life or destruction into the spirit of our children, or allowing somebody to have that platform to speak into your child's life. This can be a teacher, it can be a coach, it can be another parent, it can possibly be a family member, and I feel very strongly about this.
You do? I never knew that.
I feel very strongly about this, and I make it very clear, pretty much to if someone is in our world, but outside of that, obviously your children, if they're going to school outside of the home, you don't know all the things that are communicated to your child.
Sure.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of an example here. So our youngest was on a soccer team. This is a few years ago. And unfortunately, the team wasn't a winning team. And who wants to be on a team where you're losing every single game? It can be a little disheartening. It's not fun when you're little. You want to win games. And that's just a natural response for a kid, especially if you're playing competitive sport. They're playing hard to want to win. And so at the end of the last game, he had said a comment to me about how he was, glad that he was moving on to another team because he wanted to win games. It was a conversation between mother and son. Now, I corrected what he had said.
Right, because what he had said was wrong.
And I corrected that. But again, it was said to me, and someone else had overheard it, another parent who has way too much time on their hands, and went to the coach, and then the coach spoke ill of our child, and also when they played each other a year later, told all of the kids what he had said, tried to get all of these kids against him, which is encouraging bullying, which I'm not about. And here's the thing, our son didn't have any ugliness towards any of the other players, or even towards the coach, because we had bumped into her at a store, and he said, "Oh, hi," very kind, very respectful, and she was extremely rude in public to him and didn't say hello back, gave him a nasty look, and I saw it. And I didn't say anything to him. I appreciate the fact that he was so kind, he's so friendly, but that was an example of somebody trying to destroy the spirit of my child, and then also encourage other people.
Right. Children who are immature, we're talking about.
Now so this person is now instructing other children to bully other kids.
Right.
Okay? So 2 examples of how someone is speaking.
A comment that was made, and she heard it third, fourth, party.
And it wasn't, and here's the thing. And
it was a moment of frustration he had.
Yeah, he was excited about being on another team. I'm saying, this isn't something that he said that was in violence. He wasn't, screaming obscenities. He didn't say anything ugly about anyone in particular.
Right.
We corrected what he said.
Right.
But in no way, shape, or form was her behavior as a grown adult acceptable, and will I stand for as a mother.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying, parents, make sure that you keep your ear to the floor on those that are speaking either life or destruction into the spirit of your child or your children, because it can have a huge impact, especially if that person is encouraging other people to jump on the bandwagon and destroy your child. Unacceptable, and I won't have it.
And see, this is such a tough balance too. That's
not a tough balance.
That
that's
one
a cut
isn't.
and dry.
I know. But what I mean is, and this is something I've told both boys, is to kind of frame it up like our approach, and that's around other people that that's what I said. I said, look, there are other people in your life that have been given authority in their role, whether it's a coach or a teacher, obviously police officers, things along those lines they're more legal, but like thinking more about who's in our kids' lives a lot, right? Coaches, teachers, and so I tell them, like, look, they have authority to correct you in their role.
Right.
But what we will not allow is abuse, and we will not allow them to abuse that authority, and we'll always be there to protect it.
But you need to set the tone of what is not okay. And so from a very young age, I think, because there's other forms of people abusing authority, okay, that I know that other people that have experienced that, and kids that don't say anything about it because they were told to respect the person in authority.
Right.
So I've always stressed that with the boys. So if anyone in any way, shape, or form crossed a line, whether it's verbally or in any other way, that they know immediately not okay,
that's not
and you
okay.
come to mom or dad.
Yeah.
That will always,
it is
right.
And unfortunately in society, and I think most would agree, is it's gotten to the opposite extreme, where now, especially like with teachers and things, where parents will immediately come to the principal and complain, and then about their kid, and their kid was in the wrong. So how do you balance that, right? So it's just tough. It's tough. So I mean, there's been some tension in our household between us around that. Like, what's that balance look like?
Well, when it comes to this, I'm 100% not going to back down.
Well, I'll give you an example, right? So remember basketball back in I think it was 8th grade, and our older son was probably like 7th or 8th on the team as far as
I vaguely remember this.
As far as the skill level. So he wasn't starting, and he would get time, but middle school that's where like there's no mandatory playing time, right? And so Mama Bear over here got angry because he wasn't playing and wanted me to say something to the coach, and I was like, that was a little conflict. I was like, babe, I've been an athlete my whole life. Like, if he was being abused, or if there was some sort of, the coach wasn't playing him because of personal, animus towards him or something, I would absolutely say anything. But this is that kind of balance of, you got to let them learn themselves, that they got to work harder or whatever that is. And if he doesn't get playing time, then he needs to focus on working, assuming that
Right.
everything's, on the up and up with the coach, which I thought it was.
And, honestly,
So
that's something that I
that's
had
tough,
to grow
right?
with. Well, I don't disagree with you there. I mean, I
Right.
had learned that, obviously we were both in some form of athletics growing up.
Sure.
But I've never played a sport like that, like basketball.
Right.
Where I had to earn playing time. Now, did I have to earn certain things, like if I wanted to be a captain of a team or whatever? But, in that instance, yes, it was a learning moment for me, and you don't hear me say anything like that
No,
now.
of course.
But,
No, I think it's different. But I mean, that was a tough one. Part of me was, should I say something? But the other part of me was, I don't want to be that parent that's coming and complaining about playing time and just bombarding a coach who's not doing anything wrong.
Right.
So that's...
No, I agree there. Absolutely.
So that kind of, which kind of goes into our next topic, right? Which is like, when do you let a kid fail versus stepping in and protecting?
Right.
I think this
I'm
one's...
going to let you run with that because...
This one's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for us, sports is probably the most apropos, because you have that, just like the example we just talked about, like that's easy, right? Like, you didn't make the team, or, you're not getting playing time. That's one example. But, like, what for our younger son? Like, hey, you didn't make first chair. Those are, I think those are easier scenarios where you just say, look, here's what you got to do. You gotta.
Where'd you miss the mark?
Yeah, where'd you
right?
miss the mark? What do you need to improve on, and focus on that. I know for me, one thing that I'm very cognizant of, and I try to make sure I push with the boys is how important it is to get back up when you fail, right? And so that's easy to say, and I like to give examples. And I remember I told, I think it was our youngest, about how back in college, when I had an opportunity to move into the starting rotation, and I lost out. I lost to another guy who was my same, we were in the same grade, and I to this day thought I earned it, but I didn't, right?
What happened? I don't think I know the story.
It was, there was an opportunity to move into one of the rotations for starting. We were both relievers, and I was pumped, ready to go.
But why did you miss out on it?
They just made a choice.
Oh.
It was kind of neck and neck. They just made a choice.
Yeah.
So that still stings to this day, right? And so I tried to show that to the boys, that like, look, it's going to happen in life. Things are going to happen, and it's about how you respond. It's not that, and not just how you respond, but what you learn from it. All right, I should have done things different.
Yeah.
I should have done this. I should have done that.
How we react to our failures.
Yeah, I think that's from like a maturity standpoint, I think the way to handle it. But man, how do you know as a parent when to let the kid fail and when not? I think we were joking earlier, when our oldest son was about 3, I was getting a little frustrated because he just wouldn't follow what I was trying to tell him about swimming, to learn to swim, because my parents, had a pool. We were nervous about him being out in the deep end and around the pool. So
he might have been younger than that.
he was little.
I think he was.
So I went to the whole, just throw them in the deep end and they'll learn to swim thing, and that backfired spectacularly.
Yeah, and you also did it to our dog, who never trusted you around water ever again.
But I mean, my dad ended up being the one that taught our older son how to swim, because he trusted him. And our older son would not go near me in the pool for a long time because of that. So like, I think knowing each kid and what their emotional state is, and of not just figuratively throwing him in the deep end, but like physically throwing him in the deep end, right? I think it's really...
He was more cautious. He was always the kid who wanted to see everyone else do it first.
Right.
Yeah, he would never just jump in blindly.
But, for our younger son, I took a different approach. Me and our older son actually taught him to swim together, and it was a much smoother process.
Yeah.
But, I think another thing that we talked about that I think the boys have benefited from is, because you have a business that you work from home, and we've both been in sales for a long time, and
they've seen a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, they know that sales is a up and down thing. There's wins and there's losses. So it's not just
peaks and valleys.
It's not just I go to my job, I come home, and I turn my job off.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been good for them. They recognize that failure is just part of life, and you have to move on. But what do you think, babe?
But then that's the other thing. Okay, so like, of course, how do you let them fail versus protect them? It's also kind of in building that confidence. I think that kind of comes back to, with failure, okay, we need to encourage them to fail. Like if they're going to try something new, maybe they're not going to win the first time. Maybe they're not going to be a huge success. Maybe they want to be entrepreneurs when they're, they're adults and they finish school. And a lot of times there's tons of failure that comes with that. It may not be the first time they win. It may be the 10th time, and they have 9 failures before that. So in seeing how we've had failure and seeing how we've handled it, and how we process through that, I think is also kind of building a confidence in them to know that it's okay to fail and get up and dust myself off and try again. When it comes to sports, definitely I don't really fully understand all of the feeling around failure with sports. If I don't make a team, or being on a losing team all season, I obviously think that I would probably want to be on the winning team, but right now I think the chapter that we're in with our oldest son, he's left home. He is living on his own. He's got roommates. This was a huge change, not only for him, but for us. And it was kind of fear of like, oh my gosh, is he going to be able to pay rent on his own? And, just kind of manage everyday life. Things that we just normally do, like buy groceries. We fill up the fridge. He doesn't worry about the fridge, and, little things as far as setting an apartment up, signing a contract. And so those were things that I think, as far as a recent experience with failures that we just experienced, and letting them fail, but with a little bit of a safety net.
With a lifeline?
Yeah. So they know that they're still, we're still here to turn to, and I think that safety net should always be there. Not necessarily has to be financial, but someone to talk to, someone who's there. They know that we're in their corner, even if they fail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one kind of last takeaway around this balance of letting them fail versus protecting them is, I think it's really important to understand that what you may feel as a parent is protecting them is actually just making them weak. So you may see something about to happen, and in your mind you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to prevent this. So you bring them closer, you don't let them go do something, or you don't encourage them to take some step that they want to take, whether it's starting a business or create something or build something or whatever that is.
Right. You
see, oh my gosh, well, the likelihood of that failing is pretty high, so I'm going to discourage him right from the start.
Right.
And just say, I don't think that's a good idea, the chances of fail, versus absolutely, I'll support you 100%.
Right.
If it doesn't work out, we'll just move on to the next thing.
You. Yeah.
But we're going to support you 100%. I think there's a tough balance that a lot of people, it's the natural instinct is to think.
You don't want to see them go through that
right.
feeling of, failure.
But it's really important to go through that.
Yeah.
It's how you learn. It's how you build, right? So, well, hopefully that's helpful for them.
Yeah. So the other thing that this applies to, whether they're little kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, even young adults, and even as adults, let's be real. How do you protect them when friends betray them or hurt them in some way? Doesn't necessarily have to be a betrayal. This is something that we've seen at different stages.
Right.
When they're little and when they're older. Actually, I have a really funny story around when they were little. But the dynamics of friendship I think they've changed. I remember with my best friend, who I'm still best friends with to this day, I rode down to her house on my bicycle, knocked on her door and said, hey, do you want to be friends? Guess what? We're best friends to this day. That easy. So simple, still friends. Now it's all about, everything is so, just the waters have been muddied with social media, and, so people tend to use it as a platform to, leave people out, excluding them from things, speaking ugly of another person. There's a lot of pressures around that we didn't have in friendships.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here's a silly one. So our oldest, his best friend, they've been friends since first, second grade, and his friend had tapped into his email address and had emailed a little girl and said, oh, I like you, and all this stuff, when, obviously it wasn't him, but it was his friend that was doing this. And the kid's mother found out, the little girl's mom, and was upset by the email.
As she should have been. It was a third grader emailing her kid.
It was the second grade. Yeah, there was really little, but I think what he put in there was, he was joking, but it made it sound,
a little aggressive for a third grader.
A little aggressive, yeah. And so I had to call the mom, and she handled it really well. And and also the school that he was going to at the time was a very, very strict school. So when it came to anything around social media, it was something that they were also very in tune to with their students. And, we talk about it, we still laugh about it to this day, but, that's a silly thing that could have, maybe possibly broken up the friendship. It didn't, but there are bigger things that kids experience now with betrayals. If you share too much to a friend and they gossip about it, how do you protect your child from that? I think a lot of it around friendship has to do with, teaching your kids what a healthy friendship looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of friendships, this is another one that is very near and dear to our hearts, and we've had to kind of manage through this. Now we have 2 boys. One is not dealing with dating yet.
He's not
although
in that phase yet.
There's been some younger, there's been some, elementary girlfriend, boyfriend, little situations, but it's been kind of very benign.
It's elementary.
Although it's but although one little girl, like, or our younger son, like, he wasn't real happy with her, as she was, doing her little whatever elementary girl thing that she did, and kind of pissed him off. But he kind of laughs about it now. But so that, what about a more, for teenagers and as they start dating and things,
what that looks like.
Yeah, especially. Girls and boys are different with their emotions, certainly, but so we can only kind of speak to it from a parenting of boys perspective. But
right.
Babe, you run with this one. This one is
important. So dating is definitely a coming of age phase that in our home really begins with high school.
Yeah.
So like our middle schooler right now, that's not okay for a while. It's not on the horizon for him. He has time, but we have already gone through this stage with our oldest, and this is something that has changed dramatically with social media versus when we were dating. But ultimately what hasn't changed, and this is something that I have shared and communicated with my son, with our son, as far as like dating, what we teach them at home when it comes to dating, or the example we set at home with our relationship, is not exactly what their girlfriend, or if you have girls, their boyfriend, is experiencing in their home.
Right.
They may not have the same foundation, the same example. And so whatever they're coming into with a relationship may look different. It may be complete opposite. So one of the things that, I really would say, especially with dating and as they're continuing to date, is be really strategic about how you're having that communication or that talk track around dating at that age, because they're not going to want to talk about everything with you. Okay. They're wanting to be independent. They know everything. They're 15, 16, they know everything. Obviously.
They did. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And from our perspective, one of the things we realized after the fact is we didn't realize what impact the home was having on our older son, in not necessarily a negative way. It was just how he was perceiving it. Is he had a lot of pressure, thinking that because we were high school sweethearts, that's the only way that happens. So like every girlfriend is potentially my wife in high school.
Yeah,
and it's like,
he's not really looking.
Like, okay, slow down, buddy. Yeah. That's great. If it happens, great. But don't put that pressure on yourself that like your 16-year-old relationship has to be the one, right?
Yeah.
And your future husband or future wife.
Yeah.
So that was something we kind of realized after the fact when he kind of said that to you. So be cognizant of that, right?
Yeah, and I think a couple of things that I would do differently is probably have the conversation, and I would encourage moms and dads, have this conversation with your kids about, hey, this may not be the only relationship you have. This may end. You need to prepare yourself, prepare your heart, guard your heart for a breakup. And I remember breakups. Okay, I remember.
Yeah, you kept breaking up with me in high school.
I remember you breaking up with me in high school, and I was devastated. I was so heartbroken. Like,
hey,
oh my gosh, it hurt so bad.
I was a fool.
Clearly, but I didn't have that conversation looking back with our oldest on like how to prepare that for yourself, how to protect your heart.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into the negatives, but the reality is it may not work out, so how do you protect their heart and also make sure that they leave the relationship still feeling confident about who they are?
Right.
I also think that a lot of that is also teaching them to really not lose themselves in that person. So sometimes, those relationships can negatively impact your child where they're changing who they are to please the other person.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously you want to make each other happy, but at this age, you know, I don't really want anyone having that type of impact negatively on my child, especially if their home is not really mirroring the things that we are doing in our home or teaching our children.
Yeah, absolutely, baby. And you, again, back to the fact that our boys are able to come to you with their emotions and without necessarily with judgment initially, and certainly as a parent you judge. Yeah, it's our job to hold our kids accountable and teach them, so
Right.
that's part of that is being judgmental in a positive way. But you do a really nice job with that and have taught our older son in particular a lot about how he should treat women and how he should expect to be treated. And hopefully I've had some impact on him positively there. And
Absolutely. You've set a fantastic example.
Oh, thanks. You
Yeah.
like how I teed that up so I could get the compliment? Thanks, baby.
Nice.
But, well, we're running out of time. So, you know, we thank you guys for
this
listening.
was fun. It was a good conversation.
Yeah, it kind of brings up a
We
lot
wanted
of
to
old
chat about it.
stories and things like we joke about or talk about, but, you know, everybody's home's different. And so, you know, but it's just so important to protect the spirit of the kids and the boys and your children as they grow up because, you know, the world can be hard, right? And we all know that. The real world is the real world. So if you prepare them in a positive way and then also as they're older and they're already out in the real world, be there as a support, hopefully our boys will turn out to be as successful as we think they're going to be. So, well, thanks guys for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, so we'll definitely see you guys soon when we launch our next episode. Until then, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if so, please continue to listen on Podbean, iTunes, or Spotify, and hit subscribe. Also, visit us at DestinationMarriagePodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram at Destination_marriage, and be sure to tune in to our next episode.